My guest today is Barbara Phillips, founder of Brownstone Communications, strategic advisor on culture change, and one of the most influential voices on race and equity in the UK PR scene. She launched Brownstone over 20 years ago and for more than 5 years served as the founding chair of PRCA's Race and Ethnicity Equity Board, driving ethnicity pay gap guidance and pushing the industry towards genuine, real accountability, really doing things that we need. Barbara, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and making time.
Thank you so much, Josh. Appreciate that. Appreciate you having me.
Now, when I asked you to come on, you told me that you were on a bit of a crusade at the moment, which I love that. You're on a crusade at the moment to get people thinking more about psychological safety at work. You said we've got to be somewhere safe, right? I fully agree. What is driving that urgency for you right now?
I mean, if I'm honest, it's always been there, but right now, I think it's always been there. But when you come outside of work, because hopefully we do have a life outside of work, the world's been okay-ish, but now it's hell in a handcart, isn't it? So somewhere has to be safe. And sadly, for a lot of people, home isn't necessarily that. Just being out and about isn't necessarily that. So there just needs to be one place, and it should be the workplace, because employers are obligated to keep you safe. That's in your employee contract. So I thought, well, let's shift it. If you want to look for one place, doesn't matter what your role is. I mean, clearly I'm talking about PR and comms primarily, but whatever your role is, it should be safe. And that's why I'm thinking, we need to look at it. Psychological safety. Again, it's been around for a long time, but yeah.
It's a good one. It's something that's come up. I've kind of come across it before, but for someone that hasn't come across it, what do you mean when you talk about psychological safety?
Well, the acknowledged founder is Amy Edmondson, and she lectured at Harvard in the 90s. And I think that rather than giving an academic kind of description, it's, imagine you get up to go to work and you're a human being. But for a lot of people, by the time they get to work, whether that's virtually or physically, it's not actually a space where they can be themselves, where they can make mistakes, where they can be acknowledged for their work, where whatever needs they might have, special or otherwise, are not really looked at, and they're punished for it. So it's really that, I think it goes back to that. Remember that old cheesy phrase, bring your whole self to work? I mean, it's not safe to bring your whole self to work. No. I found that. So it isn't actually safe. So it's that opportunity to bring your whole self to work and it be safe. And, Josh, it's just, we're talking about basic humanity. It's not special. It's talking about basic humanity, basic behavior, basic courtesy, if you like, if you're old school. It's just decency. Almost, but we had to give it an academic title because that's what people need, don't they? We're talking about just being going to work,
being
treating people decently, and going home doing your job. That's what we're talking about.
I think for a lot of people, it will almost sound like, this isn't dismissing it in any way, but it'll almost sound like we do that, don't we? How like, you'll be looking into this, like, how much of an issue is this? Is it much bigger than we would perhaps expect? And has it gotten worse?
Well, I think if you go back to 2010, that's when they finally introduced the Equality Act in the UK, 2010. And the Equality Act 2010, which is UK law, has 9 protected characteristics. This is for the workplace. So imagine if the government at that time felt they needed to protect 9 we're talking about human aspects, then clearly it has been around a long time, and clearly it does need to be protected. And everyone can look it up, but they're all the usual suspects: race, gender, age, your ability, so if you're disabled, your sexual orientation, marriage and civil partnerships, transgender, it's religious beliefs, etc. These are things that the government at that time felt needed to be protected in work. Now, why would they go that far? Because clearly they were people being abused or discriminated on that basis. So I think, yes, on the surface, it looks like everything is fine. And we are great with workplaces, especially in the UK, the culture is to not make a fuss and it looks all shiny. It always looks all shiny on the outside in the UK. We are experts at that. It always looks shiny on the outside. When you just scrape a little bit, deeper, it's not so great. And that's one. And then the other side is tolerance. A lot of people will pull up with a horrific incidences at work because they need to. And as the financial crisis grows and it gets deeper, and it's what people are having to put up with all sorts because they can't afford to leave. So I think that's where we are.
We're seeing at the moment, obviously, huge changes. And speaking as a gay man, I find it scary. I find it scary for myself, but I find it scarier for young people that are going to follow me into industries, because there is something in, I don't know if you'd agree with this, there is something in age and experience that gives you a power to be able to stand up for yourself that I certainly didn't have when I first began. And I wish I could go back in time and challenge certain situations. Not to kind of put you on the spot, but what are you feeling and what are you kind of hearing and seeing from people within our sector about the sort of political changes? I'm talking here specifically about challenges to, say, like the Equality Act itself.
I would say to you, when I became chair of REEB, PRCA REEB, Race and Ethnicity Equity Board, 5 years ago, I'm outgoing chair, so we're just finding a new person. Now, one of the first interviews I had, and I think people were a bit shocked, and they said, "Oh, what are you saying to young people, especially people of color, or people from protected characteristics? What are you saying them about the industry?" And I'm saying, don't come. I'm saying, don't come into this industry because it's shockingly racist, it's homophobic, it's ageist, it's misogynist. I'm saying, don't come right now because we need to sort it out. And although it has got better, I think that the work is ongoing, and I'm sure we'll come to it later. But this is what you're describing is what made me think I need to find some sort of solution. I need to find some sort of tool that I wish I'd had 25, 30 years ago, when you're young and impressionable, and you think, okay, this is how work is, this is what it's like, and no one's saying it isn't, because your parents are just enduring it, aren't they, because they have financial commitments. But I don't think you have to do that. So that's when I started with my EDI AI assistant, EDI guru, because that's exactly the point of it. We need to be empowered. If we want changes in the workplace, we need to be empowered by it, because it's not going to come from on top, because it's good for them. It works for them. And everything we have, if it works for a certain group, they're not going to be the ones to change it, are they?
I was about to ask you, I kind of penned out questions. Do you think our industry has gotten better, safer?
I think it's become more knowledgeable.
Okay, good.
I think there's more awareness there's certainly more awareness about protected characteristics. I think people realize that some of what people will endure at work isn't actually lawful, or I won't even say moral, because people don't care. People don't care about morality, let's be honest. But people care more about being sued or going to the tribunal. So that's where we are, because it is commerce, after all. It is capitalism. So I think there's a lot more knowledge, and people have a much better idea of what good looks like. Whether it influences them to change their behavior, we are still looking at that, and there's still opportunities to do that, certainly. But I think there's a lot more knowledge, and I don't believe that people can say, "Oh, I didn't know." I'm not sure. Like, for instance, with my training and my consultancy, I refuse to do any more introductions to DEI. If you didn't know, or EDI, if you didn't know in 2020, you've had 5 long years to find out what is it all about. So I'm not doing that anymore. Same as I won't touch unconscious bias, because if you're awake, you're conscious, so you know what you're doing. So, it's like, sorry, I think you do know what you're doing.
And if you don't, you've got plenty of tools to find out, right?
Well, exactly. So I don't think in 2026, people should be saying, "Oh, what's it about? What's wrong? How do I didn't know." I find that disingenuous, because you've had 5 long years.
Yeah. Sorry, you took the words out of my mouth because yeah, yeah. Um, the PRCA census has shown that I think it's nearly half of us practitioners have experienced some sort of discrimination. It's really interesting. In another episode, I was talking to Nigel Sarberts, who has launched a mediation situation, and it's something that seemingly is growing. What does that stat tell you about where we're at and the experiences that you've kind of had? You know, the bringing everything together, like Reeb, all of the kind of the PRCA stuff you've done. What does that tell you about where we're at?
It tells me I'm on the same track as Nigel because I became an accredited mediator in 2019, just to add to all of the work I was doing with consultancies, helping people, you know, explore EDI and DEI, look at safe workplaces. So I'm with him on that one, actually, that it tells us that people are a lot more knowledgeable than they might claim. Because if you get as far as mediation is only introduced into your organization through after crisis. There's some sort of so that tells you if people are looking at, oh, maybe mediation is something we should be discovering, they know they can prevent the crisis, but you know, some people would rather go all the way to mediation. Same as a lot of people would rather go to the employment tribunal than back down, you know, in a conflict with an employee. And it also tells us that people understand that things will go wrong in the workplace. It tells us that, I think it's to my earlier point, they know there's probably something they should be doing, but you know, let's see how far we can take it before we actually do it. I think that's what it tells us. So it tells us that the cognizance, I believe, I've always said, that's one of my first interviews from 2020 was everything we're experiencing in our industry that's negative is a choice. I've always said it's a choice. How you choose, how you behave is your choice. What policies do you have in your organization is a choice. Who you employ or don't. Who you promote or don't. These are all choices. And let's not pretend they're anything else. You know, there's not a fairy somewhere in the ether that's telling you what to do. These are all mainly commercial choices.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's great. I'm with Nigel on that one because I sniffed it out in 2019. But if it's going to be introduced, people are going to use it. Fantastic. I'm not sure they will. Oh, the other point I was going to make is I'm actually helping somebody through the employment tribunal literally now, and with ACAS, the law has changed. Is you have to try conciliation first. You have to try mediation first before you get to the tribunal. So I think it's important that people know that there's a change. So I mean, I'm all for it changing so there's not, spurious claims made. And so there's time wasting because you have an angry employee. I'm on the side of the law with that. But by the same token, I think it's important that employers know, you can't just let this thing run and wear somebody down. You have to try and do conciliation. So the theory, the process now is, you have a dispute. It's not worked out inside the organization. Probably the employee goes to ACAS. ACAS says they issue a conciliation certificate, which means you've tried to mediate. And if that doesn't work, then you go to the tribunal hearing. But all during that process, you can still go back and mediate. So I think that was an important change.
I'm a bit nervous to ask this, but I'm going to. Just because I'm going to ask. If you were talking to a young black or brown graduate today and they asked you, should I go into PR? What would you say?
See, today I would say there's at 5 years ago, there wasn't something called the Black Comms Network. I must give them their flowers because they are really important. It's a massive, there's about 500 professional Black and Asian, well, mainly Black and Caribbean and African now because Asian have their own network. And we are supportive. Obviously I'm in that and I've been there from day one. And you can post problems, help. I've helped so many young people through all sorts of crises, and all the elders, if you like, all of the more experienced people will say, this is what you should do. That happened to me. Do this. So I say yes, but don't do it alone. because there's a certain generation 25 years ago, there was nobody, which is why I started my assistant. It was me and my shadow. It was me and my, oh my God, my brains. What can I do? Because my family didn't even understand what I was doing anyway. They
Yeah.
didn't understand
Yeah.
PRCA.
Yeah.
All they saw was earning some good money. And I was, it's like, oh, lucky you. Oh. I didn't see the dark, if you like, the bad side. So I'd say, yes, come into the industry with your wits about you. Don't be seduced into this fantastic, it is rewarding, and you can be creative. I'm not ever knocking the industry, but I'd say come in with your wits around you and absolutely join some sort of network for support, because you are going to need it.
That has made me feel really good, because I didn't think you were going to say that. And actually, it's interesting. I've in another episode, I was talking to Laura Birch from Working Class, and we've been looking at how do you do that, and how do you, if you're approaching that situation. I come from a working class background as well. Like, how do you do that? How do you try not to spot the differences and all the stuff that goes on in your head with that? And the big thing that came out from her was about community. It's finding people that you can share that with. And what makes me a little bit sad, if I'm honest, well, I'm glad and sad at the same time, is that I look at our industry and I think of the Black Comms Network. There's women in PR. There's group. My own for LGBT is a real challenge going on at the moment, and we just
is there nothing?
It feels very, very light on the ground, and it needs to be challenged.
Need to start one then, Josh.
I might. I might.
It starts with you.
Yeah, I might. I might. We just kicked something off with Intercom. But I think we need something more. It's exactly, we need the elders. I'm the elder.
Yeah.
We need those people. I want to talk about Reeb. You, am I right in thinking you started it?
Well, I can't say I started it. I was a founder. Yeah, God, that would be that. I'd be lynched. That with that. So in 2020, after George Floyd, PRCA went out and just said that, I think I tell you how I got in. I think they posted something on LinkedIn, and I was quite dismissive. I said, oh, is it just going to be another talking shop? Are we just going to just talk about this again? Yeah. Is anything, are you actually going to do anything? And I think that caught somebody's eye, and they said, we need to have a reaction to this. And then there was about 12 or 13 of us who were founding members of Reeb, and we all promised ourselves, one, we're going to hold the industry accountable. And I said, if you want me involved, when they offered to say to me, would you like to be chair? I said, I don't think I'm the right person, because I'm not taking anybody's nonsense. I'm going to call things that I'm just going to be brutally honest. And usually PR doesn't like that. I said, I'm going to make people feel uncomfortable, and they're not going to like what they say. And they said, absolutely, then it has to be you. So
the actual way.
There was about 12 of us who are founding members. There's still about 3 or 4 of us who are still on the board who are founding. But we did promise ourselves, and I did put my hand up and said, I'm going to be outspoken, because I'm absolutely sick of it now. That was 2020. I said, I'm not prepared to endure anymore, because I can see it's a system. It's now, I used to think, is it me? All the gaslighting.
Yeah.
Is it me? Sensitive? Have I got a chip on my shoulder? All the things that are thrown at you. And then after, I said, no, this is a system that's just going to keep on rolling unless we stop, break the cycle in some way.
And my question is in a sec is in terms of what you feel most proud of over that tenure, but actually the reason why it's so vital, and the reason why you need somebody in that position that isn't afraid to make people uncomfortable, is that it's not just about PR, because you're going to feed into almost every other sector, and that will then impact what those businesses do in manufacturing or engineering or whatever. And so it's the most important to be that way. But what do you think when you look at that kind of 10-year period? It's not small, and it's not an easy job to do. What are you most proud of within Reeb?
I think I am most proud of not. I've never been a person who needs to be popular. I got that from my late mother, actually. I don't need to be popular. You don't need to. She always say to me, when you go to work, you go to work, to be respectful. You don't need to make friends. You just need to get people's respect. So if you don't, all your friends can be out of work, it's fine. If no one's your friend at work, it's fine. Just do your job, type of thing. So I've definitely still carried that with me. So if people don't like me, or not fond of, I actually don't. I'm not even gonna lie, I don't care, because it's bigger than me.
Yeah.
It's been going on forever, and it's bigger than me. So I think I'm most proud of sticking to my guns and always be the one to say what I need to say. And don't get me wrong, I've had a few tussles with PRCA when I'm doing my opening. We've had reports, and I'm doing my opening, my opening comments on reports. They said, "Oh, Barbara, I'm not sure." I said, "Absolutely," and they've taken things out and I've put them back in and
Good.
said, saying that. And I know one of them was on our ethnicity pay gap guide that we've done 2 now, and I think I put a sentence where it says, the first time we asked the industry about ethnicity pay gaps, and we said, to let us know what you're doing, this is in 2020, let us know what you're doing, where you are in your journey, what's happening with you, what we can help you with. It was crickets. It was absolute silence. It was silence. And we had to keep geeing people up. We never ever got anyone to admit that they actually even had an ethnicity pay gap. Bearing in mind, there's hundreds of people in the industry who know that they're being paid 10, 15 grand less than their white counterparts. So clearly it exists. And then 4 years later, 4 or 5 years later, when we did the last one last year, I actually put a sentence, I'll never forget the shock and horror of all of us on the board when we asked, about ethnicity pay gap. And it was absolutely silent. We were stunned. And I don't think people really wanted me to say, you're saying, ethnicity pay gap. Oh, we're on that now. But can I remind you, 5 years ago, when we were the first people to ask you, there was absolute silence. So I'm still saying what needs to be said, I think. So I think I'm really proud of all the reports, the guidance, the 2 guides. We've done a men in PR, Black and Asian men in PR. We've done a well-being. Obviously, there's PRISM, which is wildly successful, which is our mentoring scheme, which we've been going. And it usually, the look of mentoring schemes in 2020 was usually white people mentoring Black people or brown people, which is I found that a bit ick, to be honest.
Yeah.
So now, as anybody senior can mentor anybody else, generally it's going to be Black and brown people, but they're being mentored by maybe Black and brown people or white people. We don't actually care. It's all about the experience. And another thing we did with PRISM was, we know you still need mentoring, even if you're senior. We know to get to the C-suite or up to those levels, you need 2 things: sponsorship, and you need mentoring. It doesn't stop when you get to head off or when you get to,
No.
director. You still need it. Someone has to still pull you up the ladder.
Yeah.
So we look for senior people who can also mentor other senior people. And we don't mind where they're from, but we just wanted to cut through the, that white people have to mentor Black people, because that's how you get on with it. No, I don't think that is.
I do also think, though, that when you're in a mentoring position, you have to have lived it as well. You have to be able to, because there are going to be things that you will be asked, and that's the point of a mentor. There will be things that you are asked that you need to give advice on, and if you haven't lived it, I don't know if you can do it.
I could mentor you to an extent,
yes,
but I'm not in the LGBTQIA+ community, so I can imagine. I mean, racism is right there with it, but I still don't actually know. Yeah. And I wouldn't claim that I would. I would then say to you, on that section, Josh, you're going to have to find someone for your community, because, I haven't lived that.
And that's the direct thing at work. So I think I think it makes complete sense. It makes complete sense. So yeah, those are things that you should absolutely be, beating the drum for and incredibly proud of. You said, or I read that you'd said that being chair was one of the hardest things you've done. Well, I think we've touched on a bit of it. What made it so hard?
Because it's a grind. Because we are creative, we are storytellers in our industry. So I've found over 5 years creative and interesting ways to say the same thing. I've been saying the same thing for 5 years, but it doesn't sound the same, because that's what we are good at, aren't we? Storytelling, different aspects, different contexts, different viewpoints, whatever. But it's a grind because people resist, and in typically British way, it's not overt. It's
Yeah.
always insidious. People will push back, but not by saying no, Barbara. They say, okay, I'll come back to you, or maybe that's not right, or maybe we'll look at next year's budget, or that's a no. You ask people for support, and they're like, not sure if we can. Yeah, we've already allocated our budget, or we don't really do race on its own, which is another pushback.
Yeah.
We also promised ourselves that we're only going to focus on race, and I think we're still the only organization in the industry that focuses on race, and people still find that offensive, which is hilarious, because that's a classic, what they call it, there's something false equivalence, where you're not upset about the racism, you accept that there's an organization that's dealing with racism. That's what's offending you, not the actual racism. So it's hard because I'm pushing and pushing, and pushing is hard, and it's wearing. But I took that mantle on myself, because I think in my very first interview with Karai Kamgoj, who was head of marketing at PRCA at the time, he said, he was kind of introducing me, and he said, why is it? Why are you taking this on and taking this approach? And I said to him, at this point, this is 5 years ago, all the promotions I should have got, didn't get. All the pay rises I should have got, didn't get. All the roles, I should be in a senior role now. I should be head of director, and I'm not there mainly because of racism and a bit of misogyny and misogynoir. So I've got nothing to lose. I said, well, absolutely nothing to lose. Anybody wants to slag, they can do that, because I didn't get all those opportunities I should have had, my white counterparts had. I did not get. So let me use my time, in a good, meaningful way. And that's why it is hard, but that's why I'm kind of a crusader for that, because you whipped the rug away 20 years ago, 15 years ago. So here I am,
I mean, it shouldn't have been the case, but I love the fact that you kind of turned that into, you said, being an elder, you turned that into, making the path better for people coming forward now. And I just think back to situations that I had, and having a community where you could just put in, what do you do in this situation? And people being able to say, right, here's the truth. Here's what you need to know. Here's the reality. Here's what actually here are the parameters of what you can actually do. The amount of time wasted thinking, worrying, all of that stuff, just, at that
emotional drain. It's the emotional drain as well, and that can hamper your. See, when I'm talking to, and I'm helping, mentoring young people, like, and they, especially when they're going, like, I help people through like the whole grievance process in the workplace. I'm kind of like a workplace advocacy as part of my mentoring and my mediation. I say to them, the hardest thing for any community when you're being attacked at work, because that's what it's like, is you can't let the performance drop, because they already marked you as that gay guy's a problem, so we have to watch him. He's just making a fuss, gay people. It will be that kind of, and then, but your performance can't drop, because they're literally waiting to say, see, it's nothing about you being gay, it's about your performance. That's the classic HR workplace. So I make them, we'll do things like, watch your performance, start doing the paper trail, make sure everybody knows it's yours, and this is why I do the advocacy. Said, let me deal with all that stuff. You just do your job and keep performance up. And we in the community, or I, will help with you one-on-one and tell you what you should be doing, because you can't let it dip. And that's the it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Sword of Damocles, somebody said. You absolutely can't let it, because I would just pounce and say, no, Josh, I know you think it's because we're homophobic, but it really isn't. Look at your performance. And what's causing the dip in the performance? You, the bullying, the homophobia, So
hard. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Isn't it just? That's why I do this, because there was, as you can imagine, there was nobody. I just had to figure it out myself, and I did. Luckily for me, I figured it out. And we always say, I say to young people, when I used to go into organisations where I was the first black person, or the only, or both, first and only, I knew nobody was going to help me. Nobody. And once you accept that, I thought, right, Barbara, this, you're on your own here. What can I do about this? How can I protect myself against Y? A lot of the time I just ended up leaving, but not now. younger people don't have to leave
Yeah.
because they can come and say, what can I do? And we say, listen, paper trail, make sure everybody knows all the basic stuff you would say to yourself. If you, a young guy, a young gay guy was coming in, you say, look, and this is something I said on some work I'm doing with ERGs with an organization. We've put in, I've refreshed all the ERGs and said, number one rule, if somebody says they come to join your community, you have no right to out them. If I come and join the LGBTQIA plus ERG, you can't ask me if I'm lesbian.
Yeah.
You can't ask me if none of your business. I'm just here. So you have to accept. And I would say, if you don't want to be out of work, don't be out. It doesn't matter if you're really out anyway and you're obvious. It's still no one's business. So you go in, you do your job, and everybody asks you, say it's none of your business. Don't feel obliged to
No.
advice like that.
Yeah. You, through Brownstone, you advise organisations on culture, mediation, change, all of that stuff. What do you think that organisations are getting wrong? What are like the most common misconceptions about DE&I at this point?
I think a lot of the time it was just nice to have. I think before people really started exploring I wouldn't call it commercial benefits, because I think psychological safety is a really important operational aspect. So I think what they're getting wrong is the belief that one, they're not in a system that enables it. They just believe, it's just unfortunate that it's like this in our organization, but every single organization is exactly the same. So clearly it's a system. So they believe they're not in a system. And while you believe there's no system, if it doesn't exist, there's nothing for you to change. So a lot of people really cling to that one. No, there is no system. It's just, you two just didn't get on, personality clash, not that at all. And then secondly, that they don't have to do anything, that they can treat people any way they want to at work, especially as the financial crisis deepens, and that there's no real comeback because, we are a commercial entity. We've got the bucks. You're one employee. You can go and work somewhere else, which is true. But I think what I like to highlight is in your employment contract, there is an obligation by your employer to protect you. And that isn't just, it used to be about factories and not getting your fingers chopped off and what have you. But, if for a long time it extended to your psychological safety, for your well-being. You can't come into someone and absolutely torment them and terrorize them at work psychologically and then pretend that that's acceptable. So I think it's the idea that they don't have to change, or the denial that there's any kind of system, so there is nothing to change, or the fact they think, well, I'll risk it. Some people, a lot of organizations will weigh up whether it's worth going to tribunal and having a payout, or treating somebody properly and giving them the pay rise they need. People will make those decisions and I think that's what it is. People just don't think they have to get, and it's not helped by the outside society. It's not helped by certain parties, who I'm not going to give them the benefit of naming them, spouting off their nonsense. Our current government, who I think are absolutely useless. So it's not helped by societal events, but I think people just think, yeah, and they get emboldened.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's fine. If we do that, let's get the calculator out. Okay, if we sack her for no good reason, then it will cost us this. If she goes to the tribunal, it'll cost us this. I think people still make those calculations. So it's people getting away with what they think they can. And I think they are mistaken, which is why I introduced my assistant. Because once we all know what good looks like, once we all know what is allowed, they'll be like, hold on a minute. Wait a minute. I mean, on my assistant, we talk about money and pay. We talk about social mobility and class, because that's in it a lot.
Yeah.
And we talk about, a lot of all the different types of discrimination. There's direct, there's indirect, there's all sorts of things. I think people just need to know what is what. And then when they go and have that conversation with HR, they're not going to get gaslit. Because if I go to HR and say, look, what's been happening to me, under law, it qualifies as bullying. So can we have a talk about it, please? Because it's not acceptable. It's not me being sensitive. It's not actually lawful. Can we, what can we do about it? That's a much better conversation than saying,
I feel
Johnny's bullying me. Yeah, see, no feel in it. That's why we have to take out the emotional side of it, because there's lawful. But even in law, it says if it makes you feel, that's part of it. It's how it makes you feel. If certain behaviours make you feel unsafe, for instance, that comes under harassment. then something needs to be done. And I think it just opens this whole thing out that workplaces and cultures can be better if everybody knows. If everybody knows what the score is. And then if you're in HR and you know someone's going to come to you with a really salient, positive argument for why something should change, if you're going to be an idiot and just say and deny it, that's on you. But otherwise, you'll say, okay, I'll check the law. They're actually right. What shall we do? And at that point, you can say, well, sorry, we've got to sack her. But then if you sack that person, you know the consequences, don't you? You know what's going to happen. I think it's better for everybody.
The kind of the listenership of this is of this podcast is quite broad, right? So I know that there are people in the kind of the junior team and also in the senior team. I want to ask you like a double question. If you're somebody that is listening to this and you're kind of experiencing this, or you feel you know all of those, what would you advise them to do? But similarly, if you're somebody and everybody has a responsibility in this, but let's say you're somebody in a director position or an account director or that kind of area, what advice would you give to those people in that moment?
Yeah, and you know, short of not going on my assistant, because obviously not everyone has it.
Go on the
But
assistant.
if I put this on my EDI Guru assistant, for the young person, it would actually say, because I helped to train it, and I helped to train it based on most people's experiences. They don't just want to know the law; they want the context and they want solutions. What can I do in real? The point is, you get solutions in real time. If you're chatting with, you know, the Equality Act 2010, you don't want to know what it is. You want to know, what can it do for me? How does it protect me? So if as a young person experience it, you have to make sure that you have documented what it is, when it can't just be to vague memory. You have to document when it's happening to you. You do need to add how it's making you feel, but it's not really about your feelings, but that's added.
Yeah.
You have to do your best to observe how your colleagues are treated, and the difference is usually the difference between you. Let's say there was homophobia, and because it's not always name calling, usually it's different treatment and it's exclusion. They exclude you from, you know, team stuff and what's going on. So I would say you need to observe how other people are treated, and you need to be able to actually articulate, well, you treat me this way, but I know when you're with Josh, you know, this happens. And then, short of not having my guidance, you need to work out what it is you want. Because a lot of the time, people, especially young people, they don't know what they want. They want it to stop. That's it. But they don't know that's not enough. It can't be, I want you to stop doing that, because you're usually referring to someone's behavior. And much as we love to think we can, I know this from being an NLP coach, you can't actually change somebody's behavior. Only you have no control over anybody else's behavior. They will change it if they want to. So you need to give them a reason that they have to change. So I think those are the three main things. And often you can't go to your line manager, because 90% of the time it is your line manager. And you usually can't go to HR, because 90% of the time the HR is going to side with the line manager. So I think you work out what's going on and ask yourself, what do I think is going on? Don't try and do the solution, but how is it making me feel? How do I know it's happening to me? Let me just check how everybody else is being treated, and, you know, let me see if there's any differences here. And then 3, you have to find out, what is it you want? Is it, I want you to stop making me do all the donkey work. I want you to stop making me do all the PowerPoint slides. I want you to, you know, stop whatever it is. I mean, those are feeble excuses, but whatever it is, you need to work out what it is, and then make your move. And then, you know, remember, you document this, you go and visit, and this is something I do with all my clients. You absolutely have to interrogate what the employee handbook says, because how people get caught out is they don't follow the process. And if you follow the process, if your employee handbook says you have to write a note to your line manager, if you're not happy, you go to their line manager. If you're not happy, you go to HR. You need to do that. Before it really gets tasty, you need to follow the process and see if somewhere along the line someone says, okay, you know, this is not right. Then if they don't, you have to go all the way to ACAS, and you have to go all the way and stay if you can. I mean, I always used to get up, pick my bag up and go, because there were jobs aplenty back in the day.
Yeah.
They're they're not there now. So the strategy is, what can I do to stay with the least amount of damage? So that's my young person.
Yeah.
The senior person, again, this is why I had the assistant. A lot of senior people and HR people have said this to me that I'm trying to work with. The trouble is, we can't have that quiet conversation with a really senior person because I might risk getting the sack. Do you want to go and say to your CEO, you're a complete arse and you need to stop behaving that way? No one can say that.
Yeah.
But the idea is that they, have a little play on the assistant. The assistant will say, when you do that, when you slap somebody there, or you was nudge them, or you was make them make the tea because she's a woman, that's actually, sexist, and you need to stop doing that, or you could face legal action. They'll get that from the assistant, but no one can have that conversation. But assistant's not available to everybody, so EDI guru is not there. So what I'd say is, as a senior person, you do need, and I've been there, I do interrogate my behavior. I do try and look at it from step out of yourself and look at how must it be like, what's it like to be managed by me, to be directed by, am I too direct? Because I am very direct, actually. Am I too direct? Am I a bit harsh? And then the same things as I told the younger person, do I treat team members differently? Can you see, is my behavior a bit wavy? Would they be offended? You need to do some self-introspection, which senior people don't like to do.
We have to.
They don't, do they?
It's tricky, isn't it? Because the kind of the justice person in me wants to say, well, we should all be jumping up and saying, hold on a second, this is the thing. There has to be almost be a bit in some sort of anonymous thing that goes to the CEO.
Well, this is exactly what this assistant, the EDI guru, does, because it's anonymous. It's not that it's anonymous; it's confidential. No one can see, because because it's a chat.
Yeah.
Assistant, you're having these conversations in private that even though it's on my system or your system, I can't see. Nobody can see them. So that's an opportunity for you to say, CEO, have a play on this and just ask it some questions and see if not, somebody, and it's usually the comms person, let's be honest. How many times, I've worked at senior levels and I've said, yes, Mr. CEO, I know you want to do this, and I'll put it in the comms plan, but I have to be honest with you, it's going to be an absolute nightmare, and it's going to be, I don't use the word, shower of, what, but but you have to let them know, and it usually falls to us.
Yeah.
To say, from a communications perspective, it won't land with the audiences, people will be offended. You're sending this message, but this audience will actually receive a different type of message. Look at the channel you're using, look at the timing that you're doing it in. Usually it falls to us, doesn't it, in comms people, to say, that's not a great idea.
Yeah.
And usually we can just get away with it from a comms perspective, but I couldn't bounce up to a CEO and say, your behavior's really, really poor and you're offending everybody, because he'll just say, go and work somewhere else.
It's fascinating, and the crazy thing is, right, is imagine if we could just say, I was thinking about this the other day, imagine if we could just say what we thought in those situations. You could solve so many things. But
do you know what? That is the point of psychological safety. Notwithstanding, you should be courteous. Notwithstanding, is still your, the ultimate check signer. But you should be able to say to a senior person, oh, Mr. CEO, I know you're going to do, but that's actually quite offensive to us as a group. It should be that's the point of psychological safety. You can say, Mr. CEO, I know you had good intentions, but when we got that message from you, us as a group, finance, whatever, we were really quite offended.
This is how it landed.
Can we take a different approach? And it should be safe to say that. That's exactly the point. And you've pointed out, you've just highlighted an unsafe environment.
Yeah.
You've won the lottery. You just need to zip it up because you have bills to pay.
I could talk to you for hours about this, mainly in terms of like trying to kind of think of new different solutions and things that we could put in place. But you're a very busy person. I want to leave you with one question. What makes you feel every day accidentally brilliant?
I would say that I think it's just that I really took on this mantle of not caring what people think about me and not needing to be popular and not needing to be liked. And it's so liberating and it's freeing. And that was number one. And secondly, I came into comms because I studied linguistics at university. And when I studied, well, first of all, I did psychology at A level. And when I did A level psychology, I discovered psycholinguistics, which is, the psychology of language. I was like, ooh, this is interesting. And then that moved me into linguistics. And I've ended up in a role where it isn't by accident, but that's because I love talking to people. I love language. I love the whole communicating piece. But back in the day, I didn't really know there was communications was a career. It was just, I heard of PR, but not the other side of it. So I think what makes me every day is I know for these 10 years, I've just got up and I've just been myself, and I've made my career and get paid for being Barbara. And bring your whole self to work. I've really taken that on board. I get paid for being me. This is me. This is not this persona for work, this is me. And so if you can make your living by just being yourself, fantastic.
I love that. I'm so glad you said that, because as we were talking and I was doing research, the thing that to me is the thing that makes you brilliant in this is that you are just unafraid to say it, and a lot of people are, and that knock-on effect will be for so many other people that don't feel strong enough at this point. They might in the future, at this point, to speak up, and that is worth its weight in gold.
Exactly that. And I know I'm speaking, I'm going to be like, yeah, right on, but I know from having been in groups that we've all experienced exactly the same things. So sometimes when I'm talking about experiences, they are mine, but I also know they're 30, 40, 50 other people's almost identical experiences. So I can say it with, conviction.
Barbara, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Josh. Really enjoyed it. Thank you for taking the time, having me on. Yeah, lovely. It's been great.